Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in downtown Washington, D.C., where we are at the Atlantic Council think tank, where we have caught up with the Chief of the German Navy, Vice Admiral Andreas Krause. Sir, it's an honor talking to you again.
Pleasure being here.
You and I spoke last year, and you talked about how, in some respects, as somebody who was a submariner in the Cold War, that the anti-access area denial challenge over the Baltic is really no different from what you experienced then. The issue was getting that readiness up, building the capability in order to be able to present that deterrent as an alliance against Russian activity. It's a very tense time when it's come to Russia. Germany participated in the ejection of diplomats, as did 27 other nations, including the United States. How would you characterize tensions and Russian behavior in the Baltic right now, which is your key operational area?
I think, as we discussed last year, the behavior hasn't changed dramatically. It's still what we have been observing for many years, maybe on the tactical level a bit more aggressive. But in the end, I think there's still a kind of fences that the Russian forces do not overstep. But for this region, I see it very important that we are collectively acting together, and that's the reason why I'm here in the US, also strengthening the bonds that we are having between the German Navy and the US Navy.
That's right, because we saw you at Navy League, where you were, and you were down in Norfolk, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the Hessen being here and getting ready for its deployment as well. But let me take you to sort of the broader political question. The alliance is looking at a new Atlantic command at the very same time that you are also looking to expand your role in the Atlantic. Talk to us about the importance of this command as the chief of a very important navy that's part of the alliance, and the role of the German Navy in an Atlantic context, because historically we always think of the German Navy in a Baltic context, not in an Atlantic context. Talk to us about the new command as well as Germany's role in it.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think it is important after the events of 2014, the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of parts of eastern Ukraine, that also Germany and many other nations have really made a big step forward to strengthen the activities with regard to collective defense again. And therefore, we appreciate very much the strengthening of NATO, especially also on the maritime. NATO, because this transatlantic link is so important to keep the US and as a NATO partner in the game, and the building up of a joint headquarters, maritime heavy, is a good opportunity and a good proof for strengthening this and helping to operate together between Europe and the United States.
One of the points historically has been that during the Cold War, the Baltic was primarily a German area of responsibility. Now you have a very different force structure. German Navy is much smaller now than it was when you were a young officer, and you guys had 24 submarines, I think, as I recall at that time. Talk to us a little bit about the Baltic and the integrated high-end warfighting approach the alliance has to take when it comes to deterring in the Baltic.
We shouldn't talk about the Baltic solely. The Baltic is a part of the northern flank, and that is very important to see the Baltic as a part of the open oceans, and therefore it's also the connectivity between the Baltic and Norwegian Sea and the North Atlantic that is very important. And referring back to your last question, that is also why we need the strong transatlantic link, and we need also to take care of the maritime dimension of the Baltic Sea. We need strong warfighting capabilities, and despite the fact that we have the smallest German Navy ever, by the way, we are growing, we never forget to adjust our training needs on the high-end warfighting capabilities. So it is important that we in the Baltic Sea as well as the North Atlantic have this multinational approach of capable NATO maritime nations working together and showing cohesiveness and solidarity in order to be ready to challenge anybody who's wanting to challenge our security situation.
You mentioned the importance of alliance cohesion, but one of the challenges that Russia is presenting is an ability to project mass fires at long range, not just long-range precision fires, but long-range precision massed fires, as we saw in Ukraine. And Russia has demonstrated, whether from caliber missiles on submarines or even on small ships, to create lodgements in areas where they can project force from. Talk to us about the approach the alliance has to have to both defend itself against such systems, but also what it can do to turn the tables on the Russians to be able to present counterforce to them in ways that they may not anticipate?
The situation that we're currently having requires a coordinated response to that, and that is being done on the political level as well as being prepared to react on the military level as well. And no nation can do that alone. It has to be done together within the NATO, and therefore we need capable nations and navies who are really trying to prevent Russia from doing any aggression with that aim, and at the same time being reliable on the fact that they are able to react if Russia has chosen the aggressive card.
And you feel comfortable at that at this point?
I'm comfortable at that, absolutely.
Let me take you to readiness and then to modernization. Because the German Navy is going to be growing. There's a lot of investment coming in. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. But, you know, on this side of the Atlantic, there are a lot of coverage on the lack of readiness of German forces. Discussion among submariners here, wow, you know, Germany's got a great submarine force, but most of it is tied up. Talk to us about the fact and the fiction of this and all the things that you're doing as the German Navy chief to get that readiness level up for your force, which is a very, very capable, very high-end force.
Especially with regard to submarines, we have been facing in the last quarter of the last year and the first quarter of this year actually reduced capability, and there was a time of the year where we had no submarine operationally available. That is more or less the result of the behavior that we have been facing with in the last 15 years, when there was not enough money to buy spare parts necessary. We are dealing with that very positively. The first submarine is back in service. She is sailing out there and doing it very successfully, and by the end of the year we will have up to 4 submarines ready for operations.
Talk to us about your both your readiness challenge and how that's going to shape your modernization program. Germany once had large numbers of relatively, standard classes of ships, whether it was 206A submarines, you had a large force of those. You had a large force of very common frigates and destroyers. But now you have a much smaller force composed of much smaller subgroups of ships, each one of which has their own unique capabilities. For example, on the submarine side of things, for a while you'll have 3 different versions of a common type of submarine. Talk to us a little bit about the challenges of supporting a fleet like that and how that's going to shape the Navy that you yourself and your team are now mapping for the future to try to balance capability against supportability.
Very complex topic. We have been facing the fact that it has disadvantages to have only small numbers of one class, so I'm very glad that we have been successfully in procuring or in getting the decisions to procure a second batch of the K-130 corvettes. Then we have 10 corvettes back. That gives lots of advantages with regard to personnel, exchangeability of personnel, logistics, spare parts, training. So that is where we are going for. The other thing that we are doing currently to overcome readiness challenges and problems is that we are introducing the multiple crewing concept into the German Navy. I think that is a very innovative activity that we're having and a very innovative project. So for the new frigates that we are going to procure, that will be 4 ships. We have 8 crews, and those ships are technologically built to stay up to 2 years in an operations area without the necessity to return home. So I can at the same time then ensure that the crews get the reliable planning that they are missing in many cases so much, and by swapping them every 4 months and additionally keeping those forces in operations.
And talk to us about, there's been a lot of discussion on both sides of the Atlantic about whether Germany would be interested in the F-35 fighter, but also with German interest in the littoral combat ship. You've been here, you've been meeting with your counterparts. Talk to us a little bit about, in fact, when I saw you, you were talking to the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Bill Moran. Talk to us a little bit about both of these programs and how important they could be from a German context and what's driving that interest.
I will not talk about any fighter bomber aircraft because that is a topic of the Air Force, but I will talk about the possibility of how to deepen our cooperation. And as we, I think, agree that the importance of the Baltic Sea is very, very high, there is a good opportunity for the US Navy to station, for example, a littoral combat ship. For example, it can also be an MCM unit or whatever in the Baltic for quite a while in order to get a better regional expertise for the men and women, and we would be willing to support that, and it would offer a good opportunity to increase capabilities and regional understanding for the US Navy. And by the way, also showing enduring presence of US Navy in the region.
Which the U.S. Navy has been working very hard to send more ships to the region on a regular basis. Which, you know, how important is that?
It is of absolute importance that the U.S. Navy is regularly being in the Baltic. That is happening with Baltops very successfully, and we are glad about that because that shows the interest of the United States and the United States Navy in the region. And with those exercises, which came from a very low-level exercise, I think in the recent years we have also enhanced the exercise program towards high-end capabilities.
And I should make clear to my readers that was a foul-up on my part, because the F-35 was potential interest on it, even though the German Navy used to have a very good fighter-bomber force. That's not your side of the equation. And on the LCS was in order to get a cooperative and a deployment thing, not that the German Navy was interested in buying it. You build plenty good ships on your own and have your own industrial-based challenges on that. Let me take you to the question of the Atlantic and some of the capabilities that you're developing in order to be able to use in the Atlantic, because you know everybody is looking at this high-end capability. If there are, God forbid, a worst-case scenario, that would also involve the Atlantic. Talk to us about some of the things you're doing outside what is sort of seen as a typical German area of responsibility.
So after the F-125, the next major combat ship will be what we call the multi-role combat ship 180. That will be a very powerful surface combatant, which is also concentrating on the ASW. So we think that ASW is one of the big challenges for the future, looking at the capabilities of the Northern Fleet of Russia. So we will be a navy that is having lots of regional expertise in the Baltic, but shall not be limited to the Baltic. We will also take responsibility in the North Atlantic, in the whole northern flank, as we continue to operate in the southern crisis arch, so the Mediterranean, and to deal with the current challenges that we're having in those regions.
And Norway's decision to buy German submarines, how does that change the dynamic and how you might operate your submarine force as well?
The decision, German-Norway.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I think with that decision we have made I would say globally unique step. That two nations are procuring exactly the same submarines is a very, very good proof on the deep cooperation that we have already achieved in European navies. It's a good proof on the trust and confidence that two European navies are having. We are having a long-lasting tradition on cooperation on submarines. The big thing on that is that we kicked off this cooperation by defining common requirements.
Boy, you know, if only on the Pentagon they could define requirements that as well as you guys did as two nations. Talk to us about your priorities on this visit, aside from visiting Navy League, what your agenda items were with your U.S. counterparts, and then also talk to us a little bit about the Hessen deployment, which is something that is a breakthrough in some respects.
So I regularly come here and I take the Sea, Air and Space conference as a good opportunity to give some European flavor into this kind of exhibition and panel discussions that we have had. So I was glad that to be on a panel on the European Navy chiefs. This time we were then concentrating on the Hessen, as you said. The Hessen is the third air defense frigate, the third time that we integrated air defense frigates into a U.S. carrier strike group. And yesterday I have been in Norfolk to seeing her off and saying farewell, and I had the opportunity to sail with her a couple of hours, talking to the people, and what I found out is that they are really eager to prove how their professional attitude being integrated part of the carrier strike group.
And last question, what are the things that keep you awake at night? As the Chief of the German Navy, what are the things that you think about, you know, as you work to build a better Navy?
I think what we have to do is that we have the same long-lasting breath, I would call it, to build up a navy and capabilities of a navy, because that cannot be done overnight. We have for a couple of years, 15, 20 years, we have been facing a shrinking navy. Now we have managed to kick off those turnarounds with regard to personnel, with regard to material, and with regard to finances. And this turnarounds need a long breath. They need political support. They need the money in order to make that true. I think we are on a very good path, but we should not be too optimistic with regard to timelines. So it needs time, and we need strategic patience in order to make that happen.
And the last thing, do you think that what's been the positive element of all of these unfortunate incidents on the part of Russia and Russia's behavior? Has that been a positive for the alliance in some respects, from your perspective, to increase cohesion among nations that maybe were drifting apart a little bit?
Definitely. I think that the Russian behavior in Crimea and eastern Ukraine gave us a wake-up call, that we can no longer think of just living in a peaceful world, and that crisis developments and risk and challenges are not only far away from our nations, but they are very close, and that we have to be prepared to really counterbalance it in an appropriate way.
Vice Admiral Andreas Krause, Chief of the German Navy. Sir,
Pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure to meeting you. Pleasure.